The Voice AI Talk Series.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of the Voice AI podcast series brought to you by Gnani.ai, where we talk to business leaders, technologists, practitioners about their perspectives on voice AI. And I have with me Bradley Metrock, the CEO of Project Voice, an industry think tank working on accelerating adoption of voice AI around the world. Welcome to the show, Bradley.
Susheel, it's great to join you. Appreciate the invitation and honored. It's great to watch everything that y'all are doing. With Gnani.ai, and if it's Gnani.ai, I might be mispronouncing it. But look, your growth has been great. It's fun to join you on the show. There's a lot going on.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for those kind words, Bradley. Right. Today's topic is all about the future of voice payments and more specifically the role of voice biometrics in ensuring a foolproof security of the entire system, right? So, kicking off our conversation, Bradley, we've seen a lot of buzz surrounding voice banking a couple of years ago, and I'm sure it continues to live up to what the buzz was. So where do you think the world stands today in terms of the entire ecosystem taking a level up, especially in the US region?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. We saw a lot of experimentation going on with voice and banking prior to the pandemic. We saw it with Alexa skills, where a number of banks experimented with doing different things on the Alexa platform. We then saw a little bit with Google Assistant too. We saw things like Bank of America invest a lot of money into Erica. That's a little bit more than an experiment, but still, we saw data points here or there, no cohesive movement that direction, but certainly enough anecdotes to indicate a trend in formation. And then what happened was the pandemic came along, and like in so many areas of our lives, personally and professionally, the pandemic took a big eraser to the habits and the routines and the patterns that were there beforehand, enabling new habits, new routines, and new patterns to fill that void. And for voice technology and conversational AI applied to banking, it's a real opportunity because prior to the pandemic, you had a number of people, you had the majority of people saying, you know what, I might feel comfortable with this smart speaker regurgitating my balance back to me. Like if I can make sure I'm in a private environment, or, maybe there's some limited things we can do. But I'm really
Right.
not that ready for more than that. And now with the pandemic, we're seeing things like that I never would have ever thought we would see, like people buying cars sight unseen on the internet. A car for most people is, of course, the second biggest purchase you ever make, and it's tremendous. And we even see people buying houses sight unseen too. But the consumer patterns that have now taken shape amidst and as we come out of this pandemic, to whatever extent we are coming out of it, um, creates the opportunity for voice banking to rise and flourish in a way that's greatly accelerated and pretty promising. As long as the biometrics are there, we can authenticate you and feel good that you are who you say you are when we're talking to you, and with the rise of hearables and wearables, so that you don't necessarily have to engage with a smart speaker sitting on a table in public to do
Right.
stuff related to voice, the door is wide open.
Right. Right. Certainly. Well, I was just thinking about voice payments here in India and elsewhere, and I see there are so many benefits voice payment systems offer in terms of being truly touchless and offering a more personalized experience to users. So, in that direction, Bradley, where do you think we are heading in the next 3 to 5 years? And do you also think banks should focus a lot more on voice payments as the new user interface?
I think banks have to be thinking about voice payments like the house is on fire. Like everything depends on it, because we've seen over and over again that if you're not in lockstep, if you're not accommodating what the way that the user wants to interact with you, um, you're it's strike two. That's strike one and strike two, and you're almost out at that point. With banks, there's so much friction. Like, for me to do anything with my primary bank, there is so much friction. I have to, first of all, I have to have a computer in front of me. Second of all, I have to go to the web. Third of all, I have to remember my login and password, which are complicated. Fourth of all, every single time I have to put in a security question. That is the minimum to get me into where I am now seeing initial information. From there, I have to navigate what is inevitably a changing system, with new features and new stuff happening behind the scenes all the time, to get to where I want to go. I personally, just as sort of an interesting anecdote, I have a need to make wire transfers regularly. And it used to be where I had to go into the bank to do that. And then I was in the bank the other day and they said, no, 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 you can do this on the web. I was like, huh? I never would have known. And they said, yeah, it's on there. You just need to dig for it. And that's literally what they said. You need to dig for it. So I never want to be told I need to dig for it. Okay. I don't ever want to hear that. And so I did that. I went on the web when I got home and I dug for it and I found it, and I can now make wire transfers through my bank online. Why do I have to deal with any of that? Why can't I just say, hey, my voice assistant in an app, voice assistant on the phone, voice assistant maybe in a smart speaker, in my glasses, where in my car, wherever it is, repeat the same wire transfer I did last time, change the amount, and send it tomorrow. Now, how easy was that? There's so much promise, so much of a sea change in how we think about retail banking. Now, when you start talking about things like investment banking or like risk management or other like corporate finance, there's tons of opportunity as well. But if you just narrow it to retail banking, there's so much promise. It's so human, it's so second nature, that banks would be foolish not to be paying attention to what's going on, and of course we see that most of them are.
Sure. So, Bradley, I've been reading a lot about, what's holding banks and financial institutions from adopting voice payments as a primary interface, right? And I often keep hearing for the fact that some of the many barriers in adoption of both voice banking as a system, in tandem with voice payments, is primarily the security and the privacy aspects of the implementation, and also the infrastructure that banks feel is huge, in terms of the hardware, software, etc. So what in your opinion, you know, uh, can help banks overcome these thoughts and challenges in the current scheme of things as well as the future?
Yeah, banks are conservative organizations, usually by law. They're required to be that way. And so, when it comes to technology and innovation, there's this delta between a bank seeing what's going on and the movement from a consumer point of view decidedly in a direction, and then being able to do something about it in a cost effective risk prudent way. And the pandemic has shrunk that in this case for sure, but it's still there. And so what you're seeing from banks is an acknowledgement that this is the future, it's this retail banking layer, where a customer, the voice and conversational AI have this ability to reduce friction and make the experience of web and mobile easier. What we haven't talked about at all is how voice and conversational AI make the contact center part of retail banking better and easier, because they definitely do. So with banks, you have two different touch points for most retail banks, because almost every single retail bank's got a contact center, in addition to web and mobile platforms. And so the question becomes, if we integrate this technology, what do we get out of it? And this is where it gets interesting for banks, because on the contact center side, you're able to reduce costs in a way that is more mature. It's more developed at this point. If you integrate conversational AI, you're going to get these returns in terms of efficiencies and labor reductions. So you see more of it quicker there. But what's less understood is, if I implement voice and AI on the retail banking side, yeah, okay, I get that I've reduced friction, but you know what? If all I'm doing is reducing friction for the customer to pull all their money out of the bank and leave, then where am I? So, or if I've reduced friction and now I've created more problems somehow, then it's not worth it. So I think what's missing, um, to some degree, is for banks who implement this, some sort of greater understanding of, you're going to, where is the cost savings, or where is the revenue increase? Are we going to make more money in fees? Is it something we could charge for? The answer is probably no. So are we going to reduce cost? Are we going to reduce the amount of times the person has to come into the bank? Are we going to increase the fees that they pay, or increase the amount of money they're keeping with the bank, the typical account size? Are we going to ensure that we get their next mortgage or their next loan if we have this and some other bank doesn't? These sort of data points on the incremental customer revenue or cost reduction as it relates to retail banking integrated with voice are not well understood. And I think that that's probably the
Right,
next hill to climb for greater adoption.
right, right. So Bradley, I was reading a Gartner report, I think yes, sometime yesterday, right, where one of the technologies to look out for in the next 1 or 2 years would be passwordless authentication. And I can immediately think of voice biometrics as the front runner, or at being the forefront of this prediction, right? How do you think voice biometric is the ideal solution for voice banking as well as voice payments ecosystem?
The biometric and authentication piece of this puzzle is interesting, because um, what's happened is that voice has taken some time to mature, and voice has matured over a long period of time. You've had people working on NLP, NLU, speech recognition for decades now, and only recently, last 4 or 5 years, really since Alexa came on the scene and it kind of sped things up, that we've seen that this stuff really works. And the end user, regardless of industry vertical use case, the expectation maybe 5 or 6 years ago was, all right, you know what, I'll talk to Alexa, or I'll talk to this voice thing, but I know I'm going to have to say it again. I know it's not going to understand me the first time, but you know what, I'll do it anyway, because why not? Like, it's new. there's no more of that. That's gone. And now it's there. The expectation is clearly there on behalf of the user that if I speak to Alexa, if I speak to Google Assistant, if I speak to the in-app or in-web voice assistant, or speaking to a conversational AI on a call for a call center, customer support, it's going to work, and it's going to work right the first time, and I'm going to get mad if it doesn't. So that evolution has created a scenario where for the majority of the time, it would have been insufficient to use voice alone as a biometric. It just wasn't good enough. So security personnel and people who work in information security and those sort of protectors, creators of protocol and
Sure.
Those in security are, for the majority of the time, have been quick to say, no, you can have voice as part of the authentication, but it cannot be the only thing. You need to use two-factor. And that's even gotten to the point where in many situations it's law to have, for certain types of transactions, you have to have two forms of ID for most things, and convert, similarly on the internet, you have to have two forms of ID as well. Interestingly, we're now in the situation where voice, according to most experts, could be the sole biometric authenticator of somebody's identity, with little to no loss of, little to no increase in risk by doing that. The problem is that the rest of the world hasn't caught up to that, and the legal and the governmental infrastructure behind consumer protections has not caught up to that, and may never. That's going to take a long time. And it's possible that even if government looks at voice and says, hey, we see that you're good enough, but you know what, we kind of like the extra layer of protection, it could stay that way. So it's going to be interesting to watch this sort of biometric space and the authentication ballgame to see what exactly it ends up meaning that voice has evolved and iterated over and over and over again to such an extent to where now it can be sufficient, and the domains where that's taken advantage of and the domains where maybe it's not.
Right, sure. Bradley, thanks a lot for your time today. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you for listening to the Voice AI Talk series.